Welcome once again. I'm Imran Garda and you're in the stream. Today, how the green energy movement may help Palestinians become more independent and why half of Haiti still lacks clean drinking water. Now, as people in Palestine continue to face economic uncertainty and high unemployment, one Palestinian has decided to help by tackling rising energy prices. Entrepreneur Khaled SabawiThumbnail began to dig deep down, literally, for solutions. Khaled realized the most efficient, cost-effective and environmentally friendly answer would be to harness geothermal energy found beneath the ground. How does geothermal energy work? Let's look at this short video that gives us a bit of an explainer.
The seasons come and go. In the summer months, it can be quite warm, and in the winter, very cold. While the temperature of the surface of the earth changes with the seasons, the temperature of the ground below the surface does not. Even at just 2 meters under the ground, it is about 15 degrees Celsius, all year round. Geothermal takes advantage of this consistent temperature and uses it to heat homes. So how does it work? First, a large hole is made into the ground and filled with a series of pipes. A special heat-absorbing fluid constantly runs through the pipes. In the winter, heat from the ground is absorbed into the pipes and pushed upwards, where it can be circulated throughout the house. In the summer, the process is reversed. Heat from the house is absorbed into the pipes and pushed downwards, where it can be stored within the cooler earth.
So that's a helpful explanation for those that didn't know already. Well, Khaled SabawiThumbnail, president of MENA Geothermal, is here on the couch to help us better understand the process. And as always, our digital producer, Ahmed Shahabuddin, is here as well, looking out for your live feedback. Khaled, welcome to the program. The Israeli cynic will look at that and say, oh, that's another tunnel for rockets being built. It's a gambit. They're trying to find sophisticated ways of smuggling rockets in. You must understand that when you try to do something like this, it's always going to be seen through the prism of the conflict, isn't it?
It is. It is. Unfortunately, Palestinians are usually stereotyped, and they're only seen through the prism of the conflict, as you mentioned. And when people find out that Palestinians are actually innovating green energy in the Palestinian territories, it serves to shatter that stereotype.
Mm-hmm. And have you had any positive feedback so far?
Absolutely. It's only been positive feedback, fortunately. Except unless you're an Israeli border security official, it's usually skepticism and question marks. But the feedback has been excellent. People have been very impressed to hear that in spite of the obstacles that we face living under occupation, that we were able to set an example for sustainable development for the whole region.
It's going to take away that reliance on the occupier, which controls much of the energy needs of the Palestinians. However, it does cost a lot of money. How do you balance the two? You're going to need a lot of outside investment, aren't you? Well,
it's an excellent question. If you look at the economy of the Palestinian territories, especially in the context of this, this state bid, one fact that undermines it completely is that it's very dependent on many factors. One of those, when it comes to the specific issue of energy, it's very dependent on the occupying power, on Israel. In fact, Palestinians import 97% of their energy. Only 3% of it is produced, so they don't have an independent economy. And that's an important point to make. Now, with regards to geothermal costing more, every renewable energy technology costs more. And no matter how attractive it sounds, if it's not affordable, nobody will use it. So one of the challenges that we faced was reducing the cost of geothermal and making it more affordable for Palestinians to be able to use in the Palestinian territories. It took a lot of work. We had to innovate the technology. We patented a new part in installing it, and that helped reduce the cost significantly.
Khaled, we often talk about this, and even in the pre-show we talked about the political divide in Palestine, but also the geographic divide, Gaza and the West Bank. We have a question from Jihan in Gaza, and I know you're originally from Gaza, so let's just listen to her question, and then I'll ask you the question. Let's listen in.
Hi Khaled, this is Jihan from Gaza. I wanted to ask if there is any plan for the future to include Gaza in geothermal systems. I know the siege is probably making it hard to do something currently, but I'd love to know if there is any plan for something in the future, hopefully. Thanks.
It's an excellent question. Without a doubt, actually, the first system we looked at installing was in Gaza. We were building a new building, actually, and we had drilled a test well to determine what the ground temperature was going to be, and we found an aquifer that we were going to use in an open loop system for geothermal, and that was done in Gaza.
Right.
But unfortunately, after the siege, we had to stop construction, and the project could not continue. So without a doubt, absolutely, especially being somebody from Gaza, having it very close to my heart, Gaza is definitely a place that we want to install geothermal systems in.
And just very quickly, a follow-up on Facebook. We have Jesse Ayala saying, as you mentioned or hinted at, Gaza is currently dependent on Israeli energy, a source that cannot meet the needs of the population, which results in daily blackouts. He says, if you have these plans, what kind of cooperation or conditions would it require with Israel and with Hamas to bring it to Gaza?
I wouldn't see it requiring any cooperation with either party. The one thing that we're proud of, actually, in Ramallah is that we've done this as a private sector company. We've, we've done this in spite of the obstacles created by the PA, let alone to even discuss their support, or even the Israelis. They've just been obstacles. And
was it just purely bureaucratic or political?
It was mainly bureaucratic from the Palestinian Authority. There were some political, if you look at the Energy Authority, lack of support for renewable energy. I don't think the PA even has a priority list to even consider energy as being one of them. That was from the Palestinian Authority level, but I mean, from the Israelis, it was the occupation that was a constant obstacle for us on many levels. And we weren't required to coordinate with anyone. We went off on our own and we said, we're going to do this, and this is needed.
Looking at one of the tweets that came in from Michael Harrington that I've got here in our Storyfy, it says, renewable energy is the solution. The Middle East is a sun-rich region. Maybe it is possible to install sun panels on roofs. So you're focusing under the ground. Michael's suggesting, using what's above ground as well. Is there space for a holistic view at this?
Well, he brings up a very good point. Right now, for domestic hot water, solar panels are used and widespread throughout the Palestinian territories. We even manufacture them locally. But it can only be done to the point where it's producing heat for hot water. But to heat a whole building, it's very difficult. It's an expensive technology, and solar requires policies to be in place, like a feed-in tariff, where the electricity grid buys the extra energy produced from you, and it requires incentives. The good thing about geothermal, and the unique thing about it, is that it falls also on the side of energy efficiency. When most people look at renewable energy, they look at electricity generation through a renewable source, but geothermal reduces the energy consumption that's required for heating and cooling. So it doesn't need really an incentive. And because electricity prices are so high, outrageously high in the Palestinian territories, you have a natural incentive to kind of go green.
Is it a bit different when it comes to something like water? When we look at the resources and energy theme, is it a bit different with water because, for example, Israel has control of most of these aquifers? Israelis get 5 times more water than the Palestinians. Does that take even more creative thinking to try and address that issue?
It does, and it's different as well because you can't blame this one really on the occupation, in my opinion. How we build in the Palestinian territories is really up to us as Palestinians. The Palestinian Authority provides no direction. There's not even a minimum installation standard in buildings in the Palestinian territories, so most of them are very energy inefficient. They consume lots of energy, and Palestinians can't afford that. Thus, installing something like geothermal is a solution that can be done by Palestinians by themselves. They can build more sustainably. They can take that initiative on their own, and there's no reason why they can't.
Ahmed, you've got tons of feedback.
Yeah, I have tons of feedback. A lot of people, I was trying to choose one tweet, but a lot of people are curious for you to maybe elaborate a bit about the obstacles in terms of the PA specifically, or at least the political powers that be. There's multiple obstacles on many levels. First and foremost, the obstacles were because of the Israeli occupation. I, as a Canadian citizen, was denied entry 3 times coming into the Palestinian territories by the Israelis. They gave us no reason at all, and we thought maybe it's because we were drilling. They thought we were drilling, tunnels, because we're drilling for energy in the earth. And that was very difficult. I faced the prospect of never coming back to work in my, with green energy business. Another obstacle that we faced was from the donor community. 30% of Palestine's GDP is accounted for from donor aid. And what that's done is what's being called, referred to as the NGOization of the Palestinian economy. Right. NGOs are popping up everywhere. We have over 1,000 NGOs, and they're afforded huge budgets because donor communities are pouring money into the Palestinian territories, and that allows them to offer salaries that are 3 to 4 times higher than the local private sector. So they're recruiting the best Palestinians, the most educated, leaving and making it much more difficult for us to recruit and hire Palestinians. So Khaled, you're talking about donor aid. We have a question from Terence Adjei on Twitter saying, how about Palestine securing power from its Arab friends they surely don't have the time or resources to build infrastructure. I would assume you're against this?
I mean, we don't really need to secure power from anybody. That compromises our independence as a people, and that contradicts the whole independent Palestinian movement. We have enormous potential to become more of the leader, actually, in renewable energy in the region, because we face very high prices and because we face an energy crisis. And we have one of the world's highest population growth rates. So rather than become more independent, more sustainable, unfortunately, the opposite is happening.
I watched your TEDx speech, which was from Ramallah. It was on YouTube. Interesting that you mentioned that you had a call or some sort of message from an Israeli politician.
We did. A representative from the Israeli Ministry of National Infrastructure sent us an email saying, quote, "We are impressed. It looks like we have a lot to learn from you." And the Palestinian media was also very excited when they referred to me as, quote, "the inventor of geothermal." Of course, it's not true, but I appreciate it.
Take it, why not? Would you, I mean, this is maybe a difficult question. Would you work with the Israelis if they asked you?
Well, look, I believe in the principle of reciprocity. Unfortunately, right now, we're not being treated as equals within the context of Israel and Palestine. And the Israelis don't treat the Palestinians as equals whatsoever. And if they're willing to treat us as equals, then we'd be happy to work on that principle of reciprocity with them. And I know Israeli society isn't homogeneous. There are many Israelis that are very critical of the occupation and have a very high moral standard on how that should be approached. And I believe communication channels should be open so that they learn of what we're doing in the Palestinian territories, and that does shatter the stereotypes that they have of Palestinians. They're coming to us to learn about geothermal in the Palestinian territories. That's something that they would have never expected. To them, Palestinians are, second-class citizens working in underdeveloped conditions. But on the contrary, we are very educated. We're very passionate about, helping our community. And I hope at least we've set that example with what we've done with geothermal.
You've said there shouldn't be a two-state solution or a one-state solution. There should be a green state solution. Beyond the catchy rhetoric, is there something deeper in meaning there?
Absolutely, there is. It's what was the underlying meaning was that we focus on so many problems between us Palestinians and Israelis, whereas we can put our hands together and build something great. We're in a position to do that. Israel doesn't have any natural resources, and it's very little. They just have natural gas deposits somewhere. But if we were to put our hands together and we were to overcome the conflict that's between us, that is unfortunately being perpetuated by individuals, and overcoming the commonalities that we share, we could build something much greater.
Okay, let's get one more comment in from Ahmed.
Yeah, just quickly before we move on, we have Jesse Ayala. He has just a very basic question. He says, what can the average Israeli, Palestinian, or the international community do, members from the international community, to bring sustainable energy in the conflict zone?
Be courageous. Most people look at renewable energy as a extra cost. Oh, it's so expensive. There's nothing that can be done. We have to change that perspective. Look at it as an investment. You're investing in your future when you're becoming more sustainable. And we have to change that mentality. And an enormous part of it is education. There's no environmental consciousness, unfortunately, in the Palestinian territories, and most of the Arab world in general. And even in Israel, it's still a growing phenomenon. So people have to think outside of the box, think creatively, look at your future as an investment. Sure, you might be paying an extra capital, but it's an investment in something that's more sustainable. And people have to start looking at building more sustainably and from a different perspective.
Okay, Khaled, stay with us because there are going to be many parallel themes with the issue of renewable energy in the Palestinian territories, and our next topic, Haiti. So stay on the couch, and we look forward to your thoughts with regards to Haiti as well. Now remember, you can read more about Khaled's work by going to our website, stream.aljazeera.com. Now here's Ahmed with all your feedback.
So in recent days, two hashtags relating to the women's right to drive campaign in Saudi Arabia have emerged on Twitter. The first, Lahma, which means unity in Arabic, appeared on Sunday after a letter from the Interior Ministry to Al Watan newspaper was leaked online. Now, it called for an investigation after an article about Shayma Jastinia appeared in the newspaper. Earlier this summer, Shayma was sentenced to 10 lashes after being found guilty of driving without government permission, although no Saudi law currently exists against women driving in the country. Now, this is the letter right here from the Ministry of Interior, and in it, they claim Al-Watan has threatened, quote, national unity by reporting on the matter. Now, this tweet from Aisha Al-Qusayr says, it summarizes actually the anger among netizens, and it says, suing reporters for reporting a verdict that threatens national unity means that the verdict is the threat rather than the reporters. Now, the Saudi king had pardoned Shayma in September, but on Saturday she received a flogging sentence by a court in Jeddah. And the second hashtag that came out of Saudi Arabia today is Dr. Kamal study. It's also related and is the top trending one in Saudi Arabia today. It refers to a study submitted to Saudi Arabia's Shura Council that makes the case against women driving in general. Now, the study was uploaded to a Google document and shared by netizens, all on Twitter, and they dissected it apart, as you might imagine. It directly links women driving to a prevalence of prostitution, homosexuality, and non-marital pregnancy, as well as rape. Now, Nawara82, a Saudi woman herself, summarized the study for us on Twitter. She says, Dr. Kamal's study, in a nutshell, is every Saudi woman has a dormant gene called, quote, loose morals, and it's only activated once she holds a steering wheel. And Mohammed Al-Qahtani, president of the Saudi Political and Civil Rights Association, tweeted, do not be fooled by Dr. Kamal's studies, academic titles. Is there such a thing as a, quote, problem-solving consultant? Now, that's one of his titles in the study, and he claims that this has all been financed by the Ministry of Interior. Now remember, these stories come from you, our community, so if you have any stories, photos, or videos you want to share with us, send them to us using the hashtag AJStream.
Hi, I'm Deepa Fernandez. I'm a journalist and I'm the founder of People's Production House, which trains citizen journalists to be powerful media makers, and I'm in the stream.
Now, in 2006, the European Union commissioned a project that would provide water to two heavily populated Port-au-Prince neighborhoods in Haiti. Yet, 5 years later, the project remains unfinished, forcing residents to walk for hours for clean water. And to make matters worse, there was, of course, an outbreak of cholera, which took place, and that killed more than 6,600 people, with more than 500,000 taken ill by the epidemic. Haitians allege the UN is responsible after feces from a camp where Nepalese peacekeepers were based was improperly dumped into the Artibonite River over there. That is the country's longest and most important waterway. Now, with millions of dollars worth of aid going into the country, why is there such a shortage of clean water? Well, joining us now from Port-au-Prince via Skype is Christian Namphy, coordinator for Dnieper municipalities. It's the Haitian government's Water and Sanitation Authority. Paul, thanks a lot for joining us. Tell us.
Thank you for the invitation.
I mean, why is there such a shortage? There are millions of dollars being donated to Haiti to improve infrastructure, to recover from the earthquake, to recover from all the various mishaps that it's had over the years. Yet there isn't clean drinking water. Is there a simple answer to this?
I think that, in fact, there is not a simple answer to that question. What we have seen, at least with the Municipality Support Project, is that we have tried to provide local solutions at the local level to the daunting challenges that we're facing. As you know, Haiti has been very, very, very seriously affected, first by the January 12th, 2010 earthquake, and later by the cholera outbreak. And this has created very, very big challenges that have been very difficult to respond to. I think it is definitely the case that we see in Haiti, in the water and sanitation sector, a great amount of goodwill that has been generated since the earthquake, which hit when the Water and Sanitation Authority of Haiti was just a few months old. It had just been created, its Director General had just been named, and we see within the Water and Sanitation Authority a great amount of people of goodwill who are working very, very hard to try to meet these very, very big challenges. As you know, the Haitian...
Looking from the outside in, sorry to interrupt you, looking from the outside in, it seems as if a lot of this aid money disappears down a black hole. Where does it go?
Well, I believe that we can safely say that in the water and sanitation sector, we have seen very big responses to the earthquake and later on to cholera. We have seen a national mobilization that has done its best efforts to respond in the affected areas. First of all, in the Port-au-Prince metropolitan region and the communes just to the west after the January 12, 2010 earthquake, and in much of the country following the cholera epidemic. It is very important to remember that these are very new institutions that have really are in their, this was their baptism of fire, if you will. And there has been incredible goodwill that has been mobilized to try to meet these challenges. But in fact, it is definitely the case that the overall problems of providing drinking water to everyone in the country, that this will take time in order to try to gain that type of coverage that never existed historically.
Paul, I have a question online, a video question submitted from our community about Dnepa from Ilio in Liogan. So let's listen in.
Please, could you elaborate to us exactly why it was taking so long? I read all the excuses on the ports and stuff like that, but why wasn't Dnepa making sure that this project could be completed on time? So thank you.
Yeah, looking at that specific project, and just a reminder for our viewers, the water project was approved in 2006. The EU gave the green light, so did all the donors. Despite $2.5 million being donated, that project is still not running. Does Dnepa hold some of the responsibility?
Sir, again, I can speak on behalf of the Municipality Support Project, but you will recall that Dnepa was actually created in late 2009, which was many years after that project was signed. And therefore, I believe that the clock starts ticking just shortly before the earthquake, and you would have to consult the authorities who were on the signing of that project back in 2006. But you know, the track record of Dnepa is a track record of an organization that, if you were to speak to our Director General today, he would definitely tell you that this was an organization that was created as part of a reform to bring better governance and better service to the population and bring a level of accountability that hadn't existed in the past.
Khaled, do you want to come in there?
I do. I mean, there's a parallel to this in Palestine, something that the media doesn't cover often in the Palestinian territories. It's an issue with money being allocated by the donor community to a project of municipal waste. For 15 years, the Ramallah municipality, the biggest municipality in the Palestinian territories, has been dumping solid waste in the middle of a densely populated residential area. And for 10 of those years, they promised to move it. The European Union allocated 14 million euros to pay for the landfill once the Ramallah municipality found land to move it. But for 10 years, it's been pure negligence and incompetence on behalf of the Ramallah municipality, and they have not lived up to their responsibility to move that landfill. And the money's just been sitting there, and the European unions are now saying, if you don't find the site, we're going to remove the money and you're not going to have it anymore.
Let's ask Paul Christian Namphy what he thinks of that, the issue of negligence and also political corruption and how that affects the people on the ground.
Well, again, you mentioned municipalities, and that's an extremely important link in terms of the municipal governments here that exist in Haiti. The project that I am a part of, which is a Dnepa project executed by Dnepa with UNICEF support, is a project that works with the municipalities and attempts to strengthen those municipalities so that the local government, in the same way that you would have in many of the northern countries where water and sanitation are local government responsibilities, we're trying to empower those local authorities to take responsibility for water and sanitation in their sectors. And actually that is Dnepa's.
Okay, just pause that thought for a second, Paul Christian, because we're going to continue this discussion in the post-show. We've still got only about 15 seconds left in the main show. So pause that, we'll flesh it out and expand on it in the post-show. Khaled, Paul, thanks ever so much for joining us in the main show. Ahmed, we'll see you tomorrow as well. Tomorrow we look at Occupy Nicosia and their efforts to raise awareness about the divided island of Cyprus. Continue talking Haiti and water. Stay with us. The post show is next. It's stream.aljazeera.com. Welcome back to the post-show stream.aljazeera.com. As I always say, as always, so much to say, so little time. Apologies, Paul Christian, if that music threw you off slightly. You were emphasizing the issue of responsibility at the local municipality level. Please continue.
Yes, so at what the Municipality Support Project and other initiatives of DNEPA are trying to do right now are trying to empower the local authorities in the light of the fact that in many of the industrialized nations, water and sanitation management and coordination are local government responsibilities, and we're trying to move toward that model where the local communities and their local elected officials and representatives are responsible for the management of the resources. And your specific question related to transparency at the municipal level. And what we found with the Municipality Support Project is that not all city halls are alike. Not all city halls are equal. You have some city halls which are very proactive, which are very efficient, which have a very high political will to really move forward, to coordinate their sector, to provide resources to the population. And you have other municipalities which are not transparent at all and really have not latched on to the notion of what DNEPA's vision is in terms of trying to empower the local authorities to really take responsibility. So it's really a mixed bag. That's the main lesson we've learned.
And going again from that local level, rising up to the highest level of office, President Martelly has been in the job for a short period of time. Has he made strong commitments in a broader sense that he's committed to a good energy policy?
Well, that's a bit beyond my realm of responsibility. What I can say is that we have seen across administrations that most of the solutions that we're seeing come from the bottom up, come from the grassroots level, come from local leaders, local initiatives that are attempting to transform their communities, one community at a time, one initiative at a time. And this is DNEPA's long-term vision, and one that we in the Municipality Support Project are working very hard to implement. And for example, I was in a camp this morning where we saw real issues of interruption in water as many of the NGOs are leaving, and we're trying to figure out how we can provide services after the withdrawal of NGOs. And we look at the issue of the sanitation sector in terms of how we can provide sanitation coverage to people, because that has often been the Achilles heel in the fight against cholera. So these are local issues and local initiatives that we're trying to really strengthen regardless of what happens at the higher level.
If I could add to that, there's a parallel to that, to what happened in Palestine, and it's relevant in the context of the Occupy movements we're seeing, that it does take really the grassroots movements to kind of be the the checks and balances on power in developing countries, because there's a lack of accountability, unfortunately, that it requires a grassroots movement to come up and question the policies of their leaders. And in the case of the landfill in Ramallah, this is a landfill in which if you live by a landfill, you're exposed to cancer, infertility, and so many diseases. 10 years people have been living near that landfill, and the Ramallah municipality wasn't doing anything. And then a grassroots movement grew, and they got a petition, they signed it by 1,600 people, submitted it, and went protested in front of the Ramallah municipality. And I participated personally in that, and that got the Ramallah municipality to wake up and start working on a solution to try to implement as soon as possible.
Khaled, you already answered some of the question that we have coming in online, but I'll ask it anyway. I mean, it's a bit cliche to mention it, but I think still necessary. Fifi's Way on Twitter says, the problem with Haiti and other countries in crisis, and she cites Somalia, is that their tragedies are interesting to the press just in its prime, obviously, when there's a disaster. And we have Sing Alleluia, or Sing Alleluia, saying, international humanitarian aid answered a specific issue at a specific time, referring to the earthquake. Then they left as they came, leaving Haiti as it was. So whether it's in Palestine or whether it's in Haiti, I mean, people probably don't know about the landfill. People tend to only focus when there's a war or a flotilla or some stunt. Where does the responsibility lie? How do you, is it cynical to just say, well, that's just the cyclical nature of these?
She brings an excellent point, and it's what she's referring to is called crisis reportage, where reports are only being written if you meet the cut in terms of what they define a crisis as. Like if you're malnutritioned, it doesn't cut it. You have to be starving in order for the media to cover you. And then the shadow that remains over the people is even darker than what it was when the light was briefly shone on them. And unfortunately, that is a problem of corporate media. It is a problem where the crisis has to be, a crisis enough. It has to be bad enough for them to cover it, where, where issues like a landfill, which is going to create, thousands of cases of cancer in this neighborhood in Ramallah, isn't being covered now when it should be, and it can prevent those diseases from happening.
So where do the solutions lie? As you were saying, the grassroots movements, is it just that?
I mean, that's definitely part of it. Unfortunately, you can't really rely on the mainstream media to cover those conflicts. So grassroots movement, social media plays a very important role in bringing these issues to light. Activism, in my opinion, is always the check to corrupt power. So it's definitely one of the most strongest forces that could.
And on the grassroots theme, I wonder about the issue of distrust of outsiders and those who claim who want to help. Poor Christian Namphy, with Haiti in particular, looking at, say, the political history, the ousting of Aristide, WikiLeaks cables in the past couple of years showing that US contractors working for Levi Strauss and Haynes were sort of trying to pressure the Haitian government to not raise the minimum wage to $5 for factory workers and to keep it at $3. US embassy pressure and ExxonMobil and others trying to twist the arm of the Haitian government not to sign a deal with Hugo Chavez and Venezuela, which could have cost Haiti up to $100 million or so. So you have that sort of thing happening on a political level. You've got the realpolitik happening. And then to top it all off, you find that the root of cholera has come from a UN peacekeeping camp. Does that perhaps add to this psychological distrust of outsiders, which then propels people to say, we've got to take matters into our own hands now, enough is enough, we're not going to be dependent on outsiders?
Well, I think that you really hit the nail on the head in terms of many of the historic actions, both on the part of the ruling elite here as well as on the part of certain international institutional actors that have created a great deal of distrust among the population. I think therefore, the challenge is how can those bridges be rebuilt? And I think that it really takes a lot of soul searching and concrete action. But I think that the important thing is to start with significant initiatives to rebuild that confidence, to say, what is the need of the majority of the people? What is the immediate need, and how can this society be transformed? And short of that, how can communities be transformed? What are the ingredients that are necessary for that? And I think that bringing an improvement in people's livelihoods is the first immediate step. We saw a lot of that right after the earthquake, even though at an institutional level there wasn't the big push that we had hoped for, but we did see many individuals on an international level of good faith who came to Haiti, who really showed the victimized population that they were very serious and genuine in their generosity. And I think what we need to find now is the fact that, as you mentioned earlier, given that this wasn't simply an earthquake-related crisis, you had bigger crises.
Paul, did we lose him?
Skype video seems to be stuck for the moment. Hopefully Paul is still there.
I can add to something that he was saying. The political and economical implications of donor aid. The Palestinian territories is an explicit example of that, and we saw a recent example of it, of the state bid launched by the Palestinian Authority. The United States cut off donor aid to the Palestinians. So it's kind of conditional. They're like the golden handcuffs, where the aid will flow in so long as you adhere to our policy. And we saw the worst case in 2006 when Palestinians elected had a virtually flawless democratic election with an 80% voter turnout, because they elected a government that didn't adhere to Western policy, foreign policy. The donor aid was cut off and left 150,000 Palestinians without jobs in the Palestinian Authority.
Before we lost Paul, he was speaking a bit about transparency, which even in journalism I think has carried new meaning in terms of how it maybe or may not be replacing objectivity as a concept. We have Made in Microbia on Twitter saying, Haiti and most third world countries, the West gives money without urging transparency or results. So Khaled, in your experience, in the Palestinian territories, what do you make of the feasibility of transparency given corruption?
Look, sometimes you have to, you got to give credit where it's due. So the Palestinian, the donor aid to the Palestinian Authority in the past was being literally embezzled. You wouldn't even know where the money went.
Right.
But they have become more transparent. There have been more conditions on donor aid to the Palestinian Authority to have them become more transparent. And that is a necessary condition, in my opinion, to donor aid because you want its value. If I was a Canadian, I'm a Canadian citizen, and if the Canadian government was donating to a third world country, I would want the highest effect of that money, my tax dollars.
Right.
So I mean, definitely I would want requirements on transparency. But it's about sustainability as well, which is what people rarely talk about. How is that aid sustainable?
Right.
How is that further improving the independence of that economy? How is it further taking it on a track where that country can be self-sustaining? And that's rarely, looked at.
Okay, so we have run out of time now, and unfortunately, it's regrettable that we can't actually get Paul Christian Namphy back up on Skype. There seems to be a bit of a problem with the connection there in Haiti, but we do wish him all the best in trying to get safe, clean drinking water to as many Haitians as possible. Paul Christian Namphy there definitely had the sincerity of intention there, looking at the myriad problems that Haiti has in trying to navigate these issues. And Khaled, we wish you all the best in trying to get renewable, cheap energy to Palestinians.
Thank you very much.
Good to have you on the Orange Couch. We hope you enjoyed it.
I did. Very nice orange color.
Ahmed, thanks a lot. We will no doubt see you tomorrow for Occupy Nicosia and the rest of the show. Thanks for joining us on stream.aljazeera.com. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.